Okay, it's important to realize how John, the author, employs 7 symbolism, because that explains to us what he's trying to convey to us, or to his audience, in the story with the Samaritan woman. The woman speaks 7 times. Jesus speaks 7 times. In John chapter 4, verse 7, Jesus speaks first, says, "Give me a drink." That's his first of 7 sayings. Then the woman responds with her first of 7 sayings. "How is it that you, a Judean, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Okay, now let's pause for a moment. How is it that you, a Judean? That's a very disrespectful response. That's what she starts off with, right? Okay, knowing that Jesus was a master of language, the historical Jesus was a master of language and a master of insult, what kind of response might one expect Jesus to give back to this Samaritan woman? You would expect him to cut her to ribbons, right? Because he's a master of language and a master of the insult. He would figuratively cut her to shreds with his sharp tongue. Haven't you seen him do that in the synoptic tradition again and again? And in John too he does. But for some reason he doesn't. Strange. Instead, in verse 10, in his second statement, Jesus says, second statement of 7, listen, lady, if you only knew who was talking to you, I'd be able to give you fresh water. So the second statement the woman makes starts off with Kyrie, sir. You know, we're like Kyrie eleison, right? That's where that word comes from, right? Kyrie, sir. It goes something like this. Sir, you must have been sitting in the sun too long. You don't have a bucket. How are you planning to get this water that you're going to give me? Are you greater than our father Jacob? Yada, yada, yada. That leads to Jesus' third statement of 7, which goes like this. Lady, you drink this well water, you're going to be thirsty again. You're going to have to keep drudging back here again and again, but you'll never be thirsty again once you drink the water I'll give you. That then comes the woman's third statement of 7, John 4:15. You think I like coming up here, carrying this water on my head? Day after day, hey, that's no picnic, man. But if you could give me that kind of water, I would be so grateful. That's a great suggestion. So Jesus, the Johannine Jesus, fourth statement to the Samaritan woman of 7 in verse 16 is, well, go call your husband. Her fourth statement of 7 is, I don't have a husband. That's the main thing. The fourth. Jesus' fifth statement of 7 is, yeah, you ain't kidding, lady, you got 5. But hey, who's counting? The woman's fifth statement of 7 is, sir, you must be a prophet. Okay, that's interesting. Notice. Well, first of all, notice this. With each subsequent statement, she moves closer and closer to Jesus. How interesting. She begins with a hostile and alienating and disrespectful Judean, moves to sir, and then on to prophet.
All in one city, huh?
Right. Now I got a question for you. What causes her to think that he is a prophet? What was that, Lenore?
He knew about her husband.
He knew about her husbands. He was speaking about her situation. What, Lucy?
Inner things.
Okay, but he was speaking about, right, which God would show him, and only God knows those inner things. Very good. But also things of the here and now. But that's strange for American popular understanding of prophet and prophecy, because Americans tend to think of Nostradamus and Edgar Cayce when we think of prophet and prophecy. But I'm going to ask this question. Has Jesus, the Johannine Jesus in this little scene with the woman, predicted the future? Has he said anything about what's going to happen in the future?
No.
So that should go, wake up, Americans. That your understanding of prophet, you don't understand what biblical prophecy is, and you don't understand what a biblical prophet is. This woman does. What has he said? He has talked about her marriages, her liaisons, and God's will for the here and now. Prophets are not Nostradamus or Edgar Cayce. Real prophets specialize, they are specialists for God's will for the here and now. That's what prophets are. Prophets speak on behalf of God for the situation now, at hand. This is what convinces her he must be a prophet. And like Lucy said, to get to the here and now, he's got to have inside information about her, right? And he does. Where could he have gotten that inside information, Lucy? Only from God, right?
Yeah, he's not even from that area.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
I was just going to wonder if you could justify 5 husbands. That seems like a lot. Are they divorces? Did they die? Are they killed in battle?
Her liaisons. And possibly symbolic of the conquered peoples. Remember who she is. She's this is my point, right? Is this a real historical person? Or is this a person representative of a number of things? Samaritans, and also how women are in the Johannine Jesus group.
Okay.
Still don't understand.
So you're in the Johannine Jesus group. Are you in public space or private space? You're in private space. So that means the people that you're in that community with are your kin. Outside, women can't tell men off, Rose. But inside, women can tell men off, and they do in the Middle East all the time. So this is, and by the way, was this text, John, written for people outside the community, or is this a private text?
It's a private text.
Now tell that to all the evangelical fundamentalist Christians out there that want to hand this gospel to people outside on the street corners. I'd say that constitutes a major recontextualization. Wouldn't you?
To me, John is like the main thing of the church faith. I find that it's all right in there, like in a jar.
In John. Well, maybe it is in our recontextualization of John. Sure. What it is originally, Fina, is a text for a in-group of a very unique Jesus group. And there's a lot of treasure in there that we still can mine. But are we going to read it the way he intended it? That's the question. That's the question. Yeah.
Why is the fourth statement about the husband the most important one?
Well, because of the author John's obsession with sevens, seven symbolism, and because he continually, as I showed you with the Passion account, employs step progressions. So, following that pattern, it's very easy to determine by looking at there's 7 statements of Jesus, and there's 7 statements of the woman. So which statement of both is constitute the most important part of that whole thing? The fourth.
Yeah, but why is it important though? I mean, that particular
It's the turning point.
That's how they...
It's the turn. Well, we're going to find out, Lenore. The reason why is because when you consider the subject matter, tell me this. In the Middle East, do you talk about such things in public? In private, you talk about such things, right? So what has the well become for the woman at this point? It's private. What does that mean? That means the woman has become Jesus' family.
Right, England.
And that's the point that Americans don't get, because they don't see things in outsider and insider language. But Mediterraneans do. And when you see what has happened in this point, that's why it's the most important point, because at that point, Lenore, Jesus turns the space into private thereby incorporating her into his Jesus group.
But what we're trying to find out is why the big deal of the 5 marriages. In other words, what
No, it's not that. It's that it's the subject matter. The 5 marriages that could be symbolized by the 5 conquering foreign peoples who conquered Samaria, whom this woman represents. But she's with somebody now. Jesus. So the idea is not sexual. The idea is, which is what the male commentators on this text have made with all these things. And the idea is also not empowering her to be a feminist representative. The idea is she and her people are okay to come into the Jesus group. That's why point 4 is the most important part. What the author is saying is, no, they're family.
They're more than okay, they're true believers.
Yeah, but it's more it's more than that. It's more than that. Socially, Jesus has accepted them as kin. She belongs to him as kin. That's why they can talk about these things.
John is using this to overcome 700 years of...
You got it! That's what we're talking about, right? Eric, that's the same thing that Luke did with his story about the Samaritan that turns back and the Good Samaritan parable. You think the Matthean Jesus would ever tell that story? And Acts, John and Peter going and giving them the Spirit by laying hands on them. All those stories are to say, yeah, it's okay. Look, here's the situation, folks. In the 50s, Samaritans start pouring into these Jesus groups. What do we do with these people? I'm asking, what do we do with these people? Well, you don't present them with Matthew's gospel, do you?
Never.
Is that the gospel you'd give them?
No way. You'd hide it.
So you better give them a new God. You give them Luke or you give them John. And the Johannine Jesus group and the Lucan Jesus group have different ways of taking care of the same problem.
It's very neat that Matthew and Luke never talk to each other.
Yeah, are you beginning to see that? Do you understand what I mean when I say that? Oh, how does he know that? How does he know that? How do these scholars know that? I'm showing you. Matthew never read Luke, and Luke never read Matthew. Never. Anyway, she's convinced that he's a prophet because he knows her situation, and he speaks about God's will for the here and now. So she continues with her 5th statement of 7. You all have your place of worship down south. We got ours here. So where are we really supposed to worship? And that's when the Johannine Jesus gives his 6th statement of 7, which gets long-winded. And he loves to do that, by the way. The Johannine Jesus is long-winded. Goes into these long-winded monologues. I'm going to sum it up for you. Basically, it happens a lot in John. Basically, it boils down to, hey, lady, soon it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to make any difference. All right. The woman's 6th statement, I know the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he's going to show us all things. And Jesus' 7th and final statement is, ego eimi. I who speak to you am he. All right, now we got to skip ahead a little bit. Jumping ahead to verse 28 of chapter 4, the woman gives her 7th and final statement to the men in her village. By this point, she has left her water jar by the well, gone into town where she tells the men, here's the 7th statement. Come see this guy who told me all I ever did. Can he be the Christ? So what John has done here rather cleverly is arranged her statements in a step progression, and each step is a step up, isn't it? This unnamed Samaritan woman is the most intensely catechized person in the whole New Testament. She starts with Jesus in the dumpster and winds up right on target with him as the Messiah. Hey, thanks for watching. Just continue the playlist for the next part of the study. If you have further questions, this is good. They will get addressed, so keep watching. If you found value, please subscribe, like, and share. As always, questions, comments, and criticisms are most welcome. God bless you.